probably clicked this video because you think you're smart, or at least above average. You read books, you watch educational content, you listen to podcasts, you learn things, you explain ideas to other people, and deep down, you feel like you should be further ahead by now. And that's exactly where the problem begins, because your brain is extremely good at convincing you that understanding is happening when it's not. That's not a flaw, it's a feature. And it's the reason so many intelligent people stay stuck in the same mental place for years, while believing they are constantly improving. Let me tell you something uncomfortable right away. Your brain doesn't care about truth, growth, or mastery. It cares about comfort, it cares about efficiency. It cares about protecting your identity. And the fastest way to do that is by lying to you, subtly, convincingly, repeatedly. It tells you that recognizing an idea is the same as understanding it. It tells you that nodding along means learning. It tells you that consuming information equals progress. And because the lie feels good, you rarely question it. Here's the irony. The more intelligent you are, the easier it is for your brain to deceive you. Smart minds are better at creating explanations, better at rationalizing confusion, better at masking gaps in understanding with elegant language. You don't feel lost, you feel informed. You don't feel ignorant, you feel almost there. And that almost is where mediocrity quietly settles in. Think about how this usually happens. You watch a video, it makes sense. You feel a spark of clarity. Your brain releases a small reward, and that reward tricks you into believing something permanent just occurred. But nothing changed. You didn't test the idea. You didn't struggle with it. You didn't break it apart. You didn't rebuild it from zero. You simply recognized it. And recognition is the most dangerous illusion of all. Your brain loves shortcuts. It loves patterns. It loves familiarity. When something sounds right, aligns with what you already believe, or is explained smoothly, your brain stamps it as understood and moves on. No resistance, no friction, no effort. And learning without friction is almost always fake. This is why so many people can talk confidently about complex topics yet freeze when asked a simple question. This is why explanations collapse the moment they're challenged. This is why progress feels busy, but results feel absent. It's not laziness. It's not lack of intelligence. It's cognitive self-deception. And here's the part nobody tells you. Your brain is not trying to help you grow. It's trying to keep you safe from embarrassment, from uncertainty, from the discomfort of saying, I don't know. That discomfort feels like a threat, so your brain covers it up with confidence, with familiarity, with the illusion of mastery. The lie is protective, and that's why it's so convincing. If this sounds unsettling, good. It should. Because the moment you realize your mind can mislead you, this effectively is the moment you stop trusting surface-level understanding. That's when real learning begins. Not when things feel easy, but when they feel unstable, incomplete, exposed. In this video, we're going to dismantle the specific ways your brain deceives you, why it feels so real, why traditional education reinforces the problem, and how thinkers like Richard Feynman learned to detect these lies before they became permanent limitations. This isn't about motivation. This isn't about discipline. This is about intellectual honesty, and it's far rarer than intelligence. Most people don't fail because they can't learn. They fail because their brain convinces them they already have. And that belief quietly caps their growth. Before we go any further, pause for a second and ask yourself something honestly. How many things do you feel like you understand, but would struggle to explain clearly from scratch? That gap, right there, is not a weakness. It's a signal. And if you learn how to read it, it becomes your greatest advantage. If this kind of thinking challenges you, if you're interested in understanding how your mind actually works instead of being comforted by it, make sure you subscribe to the channel. This channel isn't here to flatter you, it's here to sharpen you. And what comes next might completely change how you judge your own understanding. To understand how your brain lies to you, you first need to see how it defines knowing. Most people assume knowledge is something solid, a structure you build piece by piece, a foundation that grows stronger over time. But inside your mind, knowledge works very differently. Your brain doesn't store truth, it stores shortcuts. It doesn't ask, "Can I recreate this?" It asks, "Does this feel familiar?" And familiarity is cheap, fast, dangerously convincing. When you encounter a new idea, your brain immediately searches for patterns it has seen before. If it finds something similar, it relaxes. That relaxation creates the sensation of understanding. You feel calm. You feel aligned. You feel competent. But none of that guarantees you could actually use the idea under pressure. It only means your brain avoided effort. This is why reading feels productive while explaining feels terrifying. Reading allows your brain to glide. Explaining forces it to confront gaps. One feels smooth, the other feels exposed. And your brain learns very early which one to prefer. There's a psychological mechanism behind this. It's often called the illusion of explanatory depth. People believe they understand how things work until they're asked to explain them step by step. Then the confidence collapses. Not slowly, instantly. What felt obvious becomes foggy. What felt simple becomes fragile. And instead of questioning the understanding, most people retreat. They blame memory, wording, pressure, anything except the truth that the knowledge was never there to begin with. Your brain reinforces this illusion constantly. When you watch a well-edited video, the clarity belongs to the speaker, not to you. But your brain borrows that clarity and claims it as its own. When you read a smooth explanation, the structure belongs to the author, not to your mind. Yet your brain registers the experience as learning. It confuses exposure with integration. Schools unintentionally amplify this problem. They reward recognition. Multiple-choice tests don't ask whether you can generate understanding. They ask whether you can identify it. You learn to spot correct answers, not build them. Over time, your brain becomes exceptional at passing through material without ever wrestling with it. The reward system fires. Grades come in. Confidence grows. The illusion hardens. Another layer of deception comes from language. Words give the appearance of precision. If you can name something, your brain assumes you grasp it. Labels feel like control. Definitions feel like mastery. But repeating words is not the same as understanding relationships. This is why people can speak fluently about concepts they cannot apply. Language becomes camouflage. Your brain also protects your identity. Admitting confusion feels like a threat, especially if you see yourself as capable or intelligent. So instead of letting uncertainty surface, your brain smooths it over. It replaces questions with vague certainty. It trades clarity for comfort. And because this happens silently, you rarely notice the substitution. Here's the trap. Every time your brain avoids the discomfort of not knowing, it reinforces the habit. The next time, the lie comes faster, smoother, more convincing. Over years, this creates a dangerous confidence gap. You feel informed, articulate, competent, yet progress stalls. Results lag behind effort, and frustration grows without a clear cause. This is where mediocrity hides, not in ignorance, but in false confidence. Not in lack of exposure, but in lack of friction. Real understanding is noisy. It's slow, it's uncomfortable. It involves saying, "I don't know," repeatedly and publicly, even to yourself. Your brain hates that. So, it offers you a deal. Accept the illusion, and you avoid the pain. Most people accept the deal. The moment you begin to see this mechanism, something changes. You stop trusting ease as a signal. You stop measuring progress by consumption. You start paying attention to where explanations break, where confidence evaporates, where language collapses into silence. Those moments feel like failure, but they are the opposite. They are the only honest feedback your brain can give you. In the next section, we're going to look at how thinkers like Richard Feynman learned to expose these mental lies deliberately, and why they treated confusion not as a weakness but as a compass. If this idea resonated with you, leave a comment describing a topic you thought you understood until you tried to explain it. That single reflection already weakens the illusion. Richard Feynman stood out not because he always had answers, but because he was unusually comfortable admitting when he didn't. In a culture that rewards certainty, titles, and polished explanations, this was almost rebellious. While others protected their image, Feynman protected his understanding. And that single difference explains why his thinking remained sharp while so many intelligent people slowly plateaued. Feynman had a deep distrust of borrowed clarity. If an idea sounded elegant but collapsed under questioning, he rejected it without hesitation. He believed that confusion was not an enemy, it was evidence. Evidence that your brain had reached the edge of what it truly understood. Most people retreat at that edge. Feynman leaned into it. Instead of hiding ignorance, he exposed it deliberately. He would strip ideas down until nothing familiar remained. No jargon, no symbols, no impressive language. If he couldn't rebuild the concept from basic principles, he considered his knowledge incomplete. Not temporarily incomplete, fundamentally incomplete. And that standard was non-negotiable. This approach was brutal to the ego. It forced him to confront how often the mind substitutes comfort for truth. Feynman noticed that when explanations relied too heavily on memorized steps or accepted formulas, understanding disappeared the moment conditions changed. That fragility bothered him. He didn't want knowledge that worked only under ideal circumstances. He wanted ideas that survived pressure. What made this powerful was not intelligence, but honesty. Most people avoid deep questioning because it exposes gaps they'd rather not see. Feynman treated those gaps as tools. Each moment of uncertainty showed him exactly where to work. Confusion became a map, not a failure. He often warned about what he called cargo cult thinking, practices that look scientific but lack substance. People repeat procedures, copy language, and mimic results without understanding why anything works. To the brain, this feels like competence. To reality, it's empty. And empty knowledge collapses the moment novelty appears. Feynman's method directly attacked the illusion your brain loves most, the belief that familiarity equals mastery. He refused to accept recognition as understanding. He demanded reconstruction. If you couldn't explain an idea in simple terms, without hiding behind vocabulary, you didn't own it. And if you didn't own it, your brain was lying to you. This mindset didn't make learning faster. It made it real. It slowed him down where others rushed. It forced friction where others sought ease. And over time, that friction created depth. While others accumulated information, Feynman accumulated insight. What's important here is that Feynman didn't do this to appear smart. In fact, it often made him look less impressive in formal settings. He was willing to ask basic questions that embarrassed experts. He was willing to say, "I don't know," in rooms where everyone pretended they did. That courage protected him from mediocrity. Your brain will resist this approach. It will try to escape into abstraction. It will try to smooth uncertainty with vague explanations. That resistance is the signal you're on the right path. Comfort is the enemy here. Ease is suspicious. The moment learning feels effortless, the illusion is probably back in control. Feynman understood something most people never accept. Intelligence is not proven by how much you can explain smoothly. It's proven by how quickly you notice when you're fooling yourself. That awareness keeps the mind flexible. Without it, confidence becomes a cage. If this way of thinking resonates with you and you want more content that challenges mental shortcuts instead of reinforcing them, subscribe to the channel. This channel exists for people who care more about understanding than appearances. And what comes next will give you a practical way to apply this mindset in your own learning. In the next section, we'll break down how modern education trains your brain to prefer illusion over clarity, and why unlearning that habit is harder than learning anything new. Most people assume their brain learned to lie to them naturally, as if self-deception were an accident of human psychology. But a large part of this habit is trained, slowly, consistently, and with good intentions. Modern education systems don't just fail to correct the illusion of understanding, they actively reinforce it. And once this pattern is internalized, it becomes incredibly difficult to detect. From an early age, learning is framed as performance. You are rewarded for speed, for correct answers, for moving on quickly. Rarely are you rewarded for sitting with confusion, for asking uncomfortable questions, for saying, "This doesn't make sense yet." Over time, your brain associates hesitation with failure and certainty with success. The illusion begins there. Tests rarely measure understanding, they measure recognition. If you can identify the right answer among wrong ones, your brain receives validation. That validation feels identical to mastery. Dopamine doesn't care whether the understanding is real, it only cares that the response was rewarded. The brain learns the wrong lesson very efficiently. As this repeats, students adapt. They learn how to study for results, not comprehension. They memorize structures without grasping meaning. They repeat explanations without owning them. And because the system keeps rewarding this behavior, the illusion hardens into habit. The brain becomes skilled at appearing competent while avoiding deep engagement. Another problem is pace. Education moves forward regardless of understanding. If something feels unclear, you don't stop, you move on. Confusion is treated as a temporary inconvenience, not a signal. Your brain learns to tolerate gaps instead of resolving them. Those gaps don't disappear, they stack. Later concepts rest on unstable foundations, but the system rarely pauses to reinforce them. Language adds another layer. Academic vocabulary gives the appearance of precision. Students learn to repeat terms correctly and are praised for it. But using the right words is not the same as understanding the relationships behind them. The brain confuses fluency with comprehension. Smooth speech masks shallow structure. This environment also discourages intellectual humility. Admitting confusion can feel risky. Asking basic questions can feel embarrassing. So the brain protects itself. It chooses silence over exposure. It chooses vague certainty over honest doubt. Over time, this becomes automatic. You don't notice the avoidance. You feel confident. The most dangerous part is that this system works well enough to pass. You graduate. You move forward. You receive credentials. The brain interprets this as proof that its shortcuts are valid. But the moment real-world problems appear, problems that don't match examples, problems without clear answers, the illusion collapses. And when it does, people often blame themselves instead of the training. They say they're bad learners. They say they lack talent. They say they missed something essential. Rarely do they realize their brain was optimized for passing, not for understanding. The lie wasn't intentional, it was rewarded. This is why so many adults feel intellectually stuck. They consume more information than ever, yet clarity doesn't deepen. The same patterns repeat. Recognition replaces reconstruction. Comfort replaces friction. And the brain continues doing what it was trained to do: avoid uncertainty. Unlearning this is harder than learning something new. You must reverse the reward system. You must train your brain to value confusion as data, to treat silence as useful, to slow down when things feel obvious. That goes against years of conditioning. The illusion thrives in speed. Real understanding grows in pauses. That's the shift most people never make. They keep chasing smooth explanations, assuming clarity will arrive on its own. It doesn't. It must be built, piece by uncomfortable piece. In the next section, we'll look at the psychological cost of living with this illusion, why it drains motivation, creates frustration, and quietly limits potential even in highly intelligent people. Believing your brain without question doesn't just slow learning, it quietly reshapes how you see yourself. Over time, the illusion of understanding creates a gap between effort and outcome. You work, you study, you consume information, yet progress feels shallow. That gap produces frustration, and frustration, when misunderstood, turns into self-doubt. Many intelligent people assume this discomfort means something is wrong with them. They think they lack discipline, talent, focus. In reality, they are experiencing the cost of trusting a system designed to avoid friction. Their brain keeps offering familiarity instead of clarity, and they accept it because it feels productive. This creates a dangerous loop. When results don't match effort, motivation erodes. But instead of questioning the method, people push harder. They consume more content. They search for better explanations. They look for smarter shortcuts. The illusion deepens. The brain stays comfortable. Growth stalls. There's also an emotional toll. When understanding feels fragile, confidence becomes unstable. You may sound articulate in familiar contexts, but feel anxious when challenged. You avoid debates. You hesitate to apply ideas publicly, not because you lack intelligence, but because somewhere you sense the foundation isn't solid. That quiet awareness drains energy. This tension often shows up as procrastination, not the lazy kind, the protective kind. The brain avoids situations that might expose gaps. You delay starting projects, you postpone explaining ideas, you over-prepare. All of this is your mind trying to preserve the illusion. Exposure feels risky, so avoidance feels safe. Another cost is identity stagnation. When your brain believes it already understands, curiosity fades. Questions feel unnecessary, exploration slows. You stop testing assumptions. Learning becomes maintenance rather than discovery. That's where mediocrity takes root, not in ignorance, but in complacent confidence. This also affects creativity. True creativity requires holding uncertainty without rushing to closure. But a brain trained to seek immediate clarity resists ambiguity. It jumps to conclusions. It settles early. The result is predictable thinking disguised as insight. Socially, the illusion creates subtle barriers. Conversations stay shallow. Ideas aren't challenged deeply. You may impress people with vocabulary, yet fail to connect meaningfully. Depth requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires admitting what you don't know. The brain avoids that. Over years, these patterns harden. People become experts in explaining things they don't fully grasp. They accumulate opinions without foundations. They defend ideas aggressively because letting go would expose emptiness. The illusion becomes part of their identity. Breaking this cycle feels uncomfortable at first. Letting go of false certainty can feel like losing competence. But what actually disappears is pretense. What remains is raw potential. Confusion, when acknowledged, becomes direction. The moment you stop believing every feeling of understanding, something shifts. You start asking different questions. You test ideas instead of repeating them. You notice where confidence drops, and instead of avoiding it, you lean in. That's where real progress begins. Mediocrity isn't caused by low ability. It's caused by unchallenged assumptions about what knowing feels like. Your brain is excellent at simulating competence. It's terrible at measuring truth. Once you understand that difference, you regain control. In the next section, we'll look at how to interrupt this mental pattern deliberately, how to create friction, how to expose illusions early, and how to rebuild understanding from the ground up without relying on comfort. Once you accept that your brain can deceive you, the next question becomes practical. How do you catch the lie while it's happening? Not afterward, not when results fail, but in real time, at the exact moment your mind tries to substitute comfort for understanding. This is where most people struggle, because the lie feels identical to clarity. The first signal is speed. When something feels instantly obvious, your brain relaxes. That relaxation feels good, almost satisfying. But real understanding rarely arrives instantly. It usually comes after resistance, after confusion, after failed attempts to explain. When clarity appears without effort, treat it with suspicion. Ask yourself what you could reconstruct without looking. The second signal is language. Notice when your explanations rely on vague phrases, familiar metaphors, or borrowed terminology. If you can't explain an idea using simple words and concrete relationships, your brain is probably hiding behind fluency. Precision isn't about complexity, it's about clarity. When words feel smooth but meanings feel thin, the illusion is active. Another powerful test is reconstruction. Close the book. Pause the video. Remove external support. Try to rebuild the idea from nothing. Not summarize it, rebuild it. If the structure collapses, that's not failure. That's detection. You've just caught your brain substituting recognition for understanding. Your brain will resist this process. It will create excuses. It will say you understand it well enough. It will say the details don't matter. Those are defense mechanisms. They exist to protect comfort, not truth. The moment you hear them, you found the lie. Richard Feynman used this approach constantly. He treated confusion like a flashlight. Wherever understanding felt weakest, he focused. He didn't move on until the foundation held. That patience gave him an advantage few people develop. He wasn't faster because he rushed. He was faster because he didn't build on illusions. Another method is teaching an imaginary beginner, not a peer, not an expert, someone with no background. If you can't guide them step by step without skipping, you don't own the idea yet. Your brain may object, it may feel exposed, but that exposure is where growth happens. You should also pay attention to emotional signals: anxiety when explaining, irritation when questioned, defensiveness when challenged. These emotions often indicate fragile understanding. Solid knowledge doesn't need protection. It welcomes pressure. When your brain reacts emotionally, it's often guarding an illusion. This process isn't about self-criticism, it's about self-respect. You're choosing truth over comfort. You're choosing depth over appearance. That choice compounds over time. Each illusion caught early saves you from building on false foundations. The more you practice this, the quieter the lies become. Your brain learns that shortcuts aren't rewarded. It learns that confusion isn't dangerous. It adapts, slowly, but permanently. Understanding becomes sturdier. Confidence becomes calmer. Progress becomes visible. If this way of thinking challenges you, and you want to keep developing real understanding instead of borrowed clarity, subscribe to the channel. This is where we train the habit of intellectual honesty, and the next section will show how to turn this awareness into a sustainable learning system you can apply to anything. At this point, one thing should be clear. The greatest obstacle to learning is not lack of intelligence, time, or discipline. It is the silent agreement you make with your brain to accept comfort instead of clarity. Once you see that agreement, you can no longer pretend it isn't there. Awareness changes the rules. Real mastery doesn't come from knowing more. It comes from lying less to yourself. The moment you stop trusting the feeling of understanding as proof, you begin to replace illusion with structure. That transition feels unsettling at first. It feels like losing ground. In reality, you're finally standing on something solid. This is why so few people reach deep competence. It requires giving up the emotional reward of feeling smart in exchange for the delayed reward of actually being capable. Most people never make that trade. They prefer the immediate comfort of familiarity. They stay busy. They stay informed. They stay stuck. Once you break that pattern, learning changes character. You stop rushing. You stop collecting explanations. You start testing ideas against reality. You welcome confusion instead of avoiding it. Questions become tools rather than threats. And gradually, confidence stops being performative and starts being quiet. Mediocrity thrives in environments where no one checks their understanding. Mastery grows where assumptions are challenged early and often. The difference is not talent, it's honesty. Intellectual honesty is rare because it demands humility. It asks you to repeatedly admit that what feels obvious might be empty. When you apply this mindset consistently, progress becomes visible. Not dramatic, not instant, but real. You notice that you can explain ideas without hiding. You can adapt knowledge instead of repeating it. You can recognize when something doesn't make sense and address it immediately. Your brain still tries to lie, but you catch it faster. This approach doesn't make learning easier. It makes it effective. And effectiveness compounds. Each solid foundation supports the next. Over time, what once felt difficult becomes intuitive, not because you memorized it, but because you built it properly. The irony is that true mastery eventually feels simpler than illusion. There's less tension, less defensiveness, less anxiety. You're no longer protecting an image. You're working with reality. That alignment frees mental energy. Thinking becomes lighter because it's no longer fragile. This is what thinkers like Feynman understood. Not that intelligence is special, but that honesty is powerful. He wasn't immune to confusion. He just refused to hide from it. That refusal kept his thinking sharp, while others slowly dulled under borrowed certainty. If there's one takeaway from this video, let it be this. The moment something feels obvious, pause. That pause is where growth hides. Ask yourself what you could rebuild from scratch, what you could explain without support. What would survive pressure? Those questions don't slow you down, they save you time. Your brain will continue to offer comfort. That's its job. Yours is to decide when comfort is lying. Every time you choose clarity over ease, you step away from mediocrity. Quietly, permanently. You don't need more information. You need fewer illusions. And once you see the difference, you can't unsee it.